Hello and welcome to the Time Trek podcast. This is episode number 14, remote work. Which one is better, working from home or working from office? I'm here with my co-host, Mohammed Abu Bakr. Today we're going to be delving into this exciting topic. Abu, first thoughts on this topic. What's the immediate train of thought?
Well, I'm super excited to talk about this. There's so much being written by a lot of analysts, government departments like Dodge are being created just to push employees in the United States to come to work. A lot of big organizations are struggling to bring their employees back into office. There are some companies that vouch for the benefits of work at home. So it's a very interesting topic. It's a bit controversial as well because for a lot of people who got accustomed to work at home, it will be a tough decision to go back to office. They have self-adjusted their lives, especially post-pandemic. Now, once again, pushing them to work from office might raise a lot of questions in their lives. So it's an interesting topic to discuss. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
I love this topic because the reality is that if done correctly, if people were to be able to handle it and there were certain milestones and daily achievements, and if we could really get organized, this could be handled in such a beautiful way, right? Because people can have the best of both worlds. They can have their family, their time to just get up and go do something to get their mind off the situation. It's not this constant overlook, being at work, which there's pros to that. To be within your environment of coworkers and share ideas and that sort of community feel. But then again, you have the ability to live your best life, be with your family. Sometimes it's an interesting dilemma because there's positives and negatives to both sides of it. So I guess to start off, I mean, this is very situational. I always ask a question of like, I think a question that we'll kind of talk through to get to the end, but this one isn't so one-sided. So in this case, it's like the question would naturally be, what is better, remote work or in-office work? And I think that, they both have, like I said before, so many pros and cons. So if you want to start off with sort of like what types of areas of work are better from home, generally speaking, and which ones can never really be. I mean, if you own a restaurant, you have to be on site, right? There's
Yeah.
no going home for this. And so what are some of the gray areas? Like you mentioned government work, right? Going into the office and doing things behind a desk in an office. What are some of the pros and cons that you feel that immediately stick out that we can delve into a little deeper?
Yeah, okay, so first of all, I think the employees that are getting an opportunity to work from home, this is an extreme privilege that only those employees have who work in front of a desk. If you're working in a restaurant or a factory or real estate, you've got to show up at work. You can't build a home by sitting at your own home, right? You can't build a construction building just by sitting at home. You can't build a bridge or a canal by sitting at home. You have to be on the field, on the ground to do it. So it's a huge privilege for desk-based employees that they're getting this opportunity in life to carry out work from home.
Right.
Go ahead.
No, that with it seems like with the correct structure, like ideally, like we have, a team of developers that we're constantly overlooking, that we're trying to get feedback from, that if we can have like daily tasks and short-term and long-term strategies that are accomplished, just like do whatever you want, like live your best life, do what you want. Like if you need to go and take your kids to school, or you need to go and run an errand, or you have an appointment, go do it. But if we can accomplish the things that we need to accomplish as a team to get to where we need to go, that's great. It's almost like that freedom allows them hopefully to be more proactive and schedule themselves in a certain way that benefits their lifestyle while it's accomplishing the goals for their team as well. So we're all on the same path. And if we can do that correctly, we can move correctly. But you have to be very structured, very organized, and have very responsible people, almost self-driven people, because it seems like you can get sort of caught up in I've done whatever, task I've done today, and you know what, I can take the rest of the day off because, nobody can really quantify my time correctly, and I'm just going to do it. And it doesn't maximize the potential in a certain respect. I mean, you don't want people working, 24 hours a day either, but you do want those hours to be maxed out. How do we max them out, and how do we, when they aren't being maxed out correctly or used correctly, how do you address that, and what steps do you take in order to bring that back, or do you just let somebody go? Like, what does that process look like?
Yep, yep. It's these are all very interesting dilemmas. My personal observation, Antonio, talking with a lot of friends who are, and I might sound like a bit like Andrew Tate when I say this, but work at home has turned a lot of men. I mean, it has sort of turned men, sort of domesticated men, I would say,
Okay.
and it's a bit.
So give me some examples.
Yeah. So for example, when I talk to my friends, the conversations earlier were more about, hey, let's go out and play a sport. Have you watched this particular game? Or a lot of masculine things that the conversations were about. But now when I have the same kind of discussions with them, the discussions are more about, hey, I'm getting tired taking children to the school, or I'm cooking this new dish, or like, hey, I bought this fancy item at my house that I want to show off. So I feel like what's really happening is, like, subconsciously it is making men more and more timid to go on the field and play a sport. It has reduced their risk taking ability. So they tend to have more passive conversations. So there's a psychological impact that we are not fully grasping about.
I can agree with this so much, because me personally, my personal experience, like if I do stay home, I say, hey, you know what, I'm going to take, the beginning, the beginning of my day meetings, I'm going to take them from home and then maybe go to the office or vice versa, or however that breaks down. I always notice that at the house, my wife sees me and she's like, just because I'm there, she feels like, oh, it's, he's here, he needs to help, and and it's really like I'm in work mode. And, you kind of, just because your appearance is there, you suddenly become a product of that environment, and suddenly you're picking something up or helping to do, whatever it may be that needs help at the moment, and not really, and removing your focus from what you really need to be doing. So it's in a way a distraction if not handled correctly, and there has to be rules. But then to your point, yeah, you're not going through those. It's like you're at home, so you're constantly in the in-home sort of flow rather than being in the in-office flow, which may lead to, hey, you want to go after work and go lift weights or play basketball or soccer or whatever it is that you do. That seems to get left to the
If you
side,
look
so that community aspect disappears.
if you look at the process of domestication of animals, how did it occur? Now, we took bunch of animals which were out in the wild, and we put them in homes, and we raised them in homes, and that's how we were able to domesticate goats and cows and horses. That's what is actually happening
That's what's
with the
happening.
men when they just end up working at home, because
Yeah.
subconsciously they are just, there's an aspect of lack of courage, timidity, thinking small, thinking, not taking bold decisions, more focused on the smaller nitty gritty of running a home. I think subconsciously that is happening, and that will bring a significant change in the culture and the society.
Right. And so you think it would even like stifle innovation to a certain extent? You think that because you don't
It's
take
going to
these
kill
risks, because
innovation.
you don't.
It's going to kill
Mhm.
innovation.
Yeah.
I think it will create a significant decline in the innovation. There might be very niche areas where it requires isolation of researchers to go and crack a problem. But in vast majority of the cases, it requires collaboration, team effort, going and solving a problem with your team. That doesn't happen if you're working at home.
And so my question to you, and I guess kind of brainstorming this, like, what would be the approach then to say, hey, we have this, quote unquote privilege to work from home, but how do we change the dynamic to whereas, we still have that feeling and that freedom?
So I think what will happen, Antonio, is that we will increasingly become an hybrid society where within an enterprise will define the roles which can potentially support work at home, and what would be the roles that absolutely can't support work at home. And there will be a
Right.
different paycheck for that, because coming to office, you're spending that extra hour and a half in travel. That also needs to be incorporated. And one of the things that work at home has, the reason why a lot of people really want work at home is because they want to avoid that travel time.
Right.
That
That's a
travel
big
time generally
problem.
is unpaid. So
Right.
so they are questioning, like, hey, if I am for the sake of the organization traveling 1.5 hours, then who's going to pay for that 1.5 hours of my daily commute time?
Right, right. It's the back and forth, it's the
Yep,
time, it's the risk, I mean, there's so many, costs that go associated to it,
yep,
the oil in the car, the gas, the wear and tear,
yep.
the stress on your life. It's a lot. It's a lot to avoid that. And if you could just dedicate it to work is incredibly effective from that point of view. But then comes the other downside of
Yeah.
this.
So that's where what will happen is that the modern organizations will start creating roles which are work at home roles, which will be slightly paid lesser, and then there will be work at office roles that will be paid slightly higher, and there will be like some level of organizational dynamics based on that. I think within an
Or,
organization, there's definitely roles that can be carried out from home, and organizations
mhm.
will tap into that because they can lower the cost. Lesser employees in the office, they can have lesser office space, they don't have to spend extra cost on various perks, and work at home itself can be considered as a perk for some of the employees. So there will be work at home roles, and then there will definitely be work at office roles, like the roles that involve the leadership roles, the roles that involve research, collaboration, innovation. Those kind of roles will be paid slightly more, but they will be definitely work at office.
I mean, do you see a world where there'll be a level of like a virtual reality type interaction between, these creatives or these C levels to accomplish the same goals that they would have in office through a virtual world and have that experience? Do you think it'll get to that point? I mean, I assume eventually it will, but like, what does that look like? What are the risks involved? And are we just continuing to decouple ourselves from community, right? Because it seems like the more technology we incorporate into our lives, the more distant, the more closer we feel, but aren't really. The more closer we are online, the more distant we are in real life from the human touch perspective. So it's like this artificial world that little by little layering above us over and over is kind of distancing us from the reality of being together. I mean, is there truly a true advantage? And do we think ahead and try and avoid this technological shift that's obviously coming at us 1,000 miles an hour in order to keep that interaction, keep that community? It seems like at the end of the day, like, where are we going with this really? And for this isn't just in work; it's everywhere else. But we'll stick to the work topic for now.
Yeah, I think the technological shift that's happening, I see that's part and parcel of life. It's not a big change. The world is still moving at 10% increment a year. If somebody in the Wall Street is able to make 20% a year, they celebrate. So the world is just generating 10% more wealth every year. That's it. So we're
Hmm.
not changing at a much significant rapid pace that we should be worried about. But I
Well, I mean, yeah, but over a 10 or 20 year period, we will see that change. What I'm ultimately getting to is maybe it's not year over year change that we're worried about. Yeah, and so we're fine for now, but 10, 15 years down the line, that technology will be available and that experience will be available, and it'll remove us from the human aspect, the human element of being together and having a brainstorm. Or maybe it'll bring us closer to being able to do that, but virtually. And like, do we allow for that to continue to progress, and do we step into it, which it seems inevitable, or do we push to come together? I mean, I'm just looking
I
at
think we are significantly underestimating the importance of mental health.
yeah.
Humans like to be around humans.
Hmm.
That's how cities and villages came into existence. Thousands of years ago, we were hunting in isolation and we were living lives. But then once we decided that, hey, we can come together and accomplish bigger things, that's how the villages and then subsequently towns and cities started forming. And that led to culture and religions and everything else that we see around. Um, so I think humans would always prefer to stay together. No matter how much technology will come in, humans will always like to interact with each other, have food together, share ideas, share stories, have crack jokes with each other. So I think that thing will continue no matter how much technology will evolve.
It will continue, but little by little, we're disconnecting more and more from it in every sense of it in our everyday life.
How you look at it, I have this very interesting aspect of technology that I would like to share with you. So in India, we is a society with a lot of income disparities. You have people who are way too rich, and then you have people who can't afford two times a meal. And what has happened is throughout the history, the rich people in India always had a different lifestyle, and the poor people always had a different lifestyle. The kind of food they ate, the kind of clothes they wore, the kind of the kind of vehicles that they drove, everything is different for the super rich and for the super poor. But what has happened in last 20 years is that the technology has brought them on the same platform. The WhatsApp that the richest of the rich in India uses, or the poorest of the poor in India uses, is the same. The Facebook is the same. The Instagram is the same. So what technology has done for the first time ever is created this equalizing platform for both the super rich and the super poor. This has never happened. So you
Yeah,
can say actually that technology has brought everyone on a same platform, which never ever happened.
that's a good point. That's a good point. That's a good point, right? Because it's democratized your voice. It's not about how much money you have. It's really about the message you're
Yep.
trying to get across, whatever it may be, from a business perspective, from a personal perspective. It's if the message is if it grabs and it pulls eyes, then it will grow. Automatically. And so it's not about how much. I mean, you can market something, you can pay your way into it, but everybody has an equal playing field to a certain extent. I like that point a lot. So yeah, technology has democratized
Yep. So it has brought people
access
together
to a
in a,
certain
in a,
point.
in a sense. It has,
Yeah.
otherwise, and what that has also done is given this opportunity for even the poor, maybe not as poor as can't afford two times a meal, but at least the people who are surviving on a couple of $100 a month, they now also have an opportunity to use the technology to come out of this poverty.
Now, the paradox here is that with all this technology, though, and it does create more, I hear where you're coming from. It does create more access,
Yeah.
but at the same time, there's a bunch of layers, and we're able to sit back and isolate ourselves while being, part of a community, but online. So our ways of getting together and sharing stories and doing these things are becoming more and more online. So it's less human physical interaction and more virtual interaction. So we're leading into this.
Another point I want to make, Antonio, is that recently I was reading about this Library of Alexandria. This was the most privileged library that only the elite of the Greeks had access to.
Hmm.
So if you are like a Greek and you want to get access to this library, you have to like meet certain bar in terms of education, intellectuality, and then you get access to this library.
Right.
2,000, 3,000 years now, when we look at it, with internet, everyone has access to the knowledge. We have more access to the intellectual capital than the elite of the Greeks had in the Library of Alexandria. Today,
Yeah.
anybody can just open up MIT courseware and go through what the kind of lectures that are happening at MIT. They can open up Stanford courseware. They can open up, if they just go on YouTube, they can find lectures on quantum mechanics, quantum field theory, or even quantum computing, various computer science. So I think just the
Of course.
access to the knowledge has become extremely low cost, and there's absolutely no barrier. Anybody in the world can
So so
today gain that knowledge.
so this is a really good point here. And by the way, I've been to Alexandria in Egypt, and I've been to the library, and it's beautiful. Well, the newer one. But one really good point that you're bringing up that I'm bringing together here is that the collaboration within other humans is effective for brainstorming, for shooting ideas, and kind of getting places. It's like nowadays with the internet, with artificial intelligence, everybody can independently brainstorm or research ideas and then share with a team, and it'll be a much more broad perspective, and there could possibly be more creativity because of that. And so that access to information creates better. If the team is a very functional team, everybody independently is doing their thing and they're researching and they're going about it, them sharing this broad perspective allows for deeper brainstorming and perhaps more innovation. So in a way, it could help. What does the future of how do we implement strategy that could make at home working more effective? How do we not become so domesticated? What solutions can we present here to solve a lot of these problems that we're seeing?
I think some blunt solutions are definitely needed. What we have witnessed in last 6 months at least is that the world has become a little bit more vocal about a lot of nonsense that was happening in various enterprises. In the name of diversity, people were hiring or just making very, very
Agreed.
bad decisions in terms of hiring. There are certain kind of diversities that are really good, and there are certain kind of pushed upon diversities which will not produce results. So
Hmm.
there's a subtle difference there, uh, which um, which has like kind of come out very openly in last 6 months across the world, and a lot of analysts, a lot of enterprises are taking a note about that. I think it's the same thing with the work at home as well. Uh, it's an agenda that's been pushed on a lot of enterprises. Um, I think I think more and more enterprises will start asking their employees to come back to office, especially those enterprises that are doing disruptive work, those who want to be at forefront of uh, the kind of innovation that they keep doing. So yeah, I
Right,
think
but
that
the
direction will
news
go.
being shared and the focus was like on diversity, and it was about, like that was the core focus. It wasn't on, I mean, it's not that it loses the focus on innovation and being different, because at the end of the day, you do have to have that more innovative product or a better sales team to get that product across, or you have to have the sales. But like in the spotlight is diversity. Now in the spotlight is innovation, is technological shift. And so the focus has come back. I'm thinking more about I'm just thinking like I personally I love to work with people. I think it creates, I think it creates a bond that's fun. And so when you're sitting with somebody or you're having a good time, discussing work and you're brainstorming, ideas come about. And so I think the real core of it isn't necessarily being in office or out of office. It's really having people around you that are able to dive into relationships and use those relationships for creativity and expansive purposes in a fun way. Because if you notice, and I have certain relationships with people on the team and with you, and how we will talk about something and we could kid around with it, but that interaction allows us to brainstorm and it be fun and it's natural and it flows. But if you're dealing with somebody who's perhaps less conversational, or has trouble communicating effectively, it creates barriers in the communication as to accomplishing things. And it lacks, since we lack so much communication, there lacks ability to understand if things are being met or how they're going about, or if goals are going to be accomplished. And so you're just kind of like in a gray area all the time, which kind of stinks when you're working from home. When in person, it could be like, hey, show me. And as much as you do that virtually, the camera's off and things of this nature, just it doesn't feel connected. But in person, you can't sort of avoid that. I think one key thing that would change, and it's not necessarily having the video on, but for people who are less conversational and have problems communicating, turning the camera on will add a layer of humanity to it, where they can feel like they need to engage more, because we're really focusing on mannerisms and just things that are caught by the eye, that you see in others, rather than just the voice and voice inflection. So perhaps if you're in a difficult situation with teammates, it's like turn on your camera and like let's have a chat, and like let's try to laugh and talk about this, and like let's arrive somewhere.
Share a very strange observation that I've been having. When I wear shoes and I do work at home, my productivity is slightly better compared to when I don't wear shoes. When
It's
I
it's
first thought about this, I laughed at myself. Like, it doesn't make sense. But I've seen this again and again that whenever I'm wearing shoes, my productivity is better. I'm getting more things accomplished.
That's so funny. That's how I feel about dressing up. Like taking a shower in the morning and putting your clothes on and like dressing like if you're going to go into office, you're like, you feel good, you're clean, you have that feeling. And so it creates an environment around you like you're going to go do something. And even though you're at home, if you get dressed up, you're kind of like, okay, I'm ready, and like
Yeah,
I'm here. Yeah.
I've no idea why that just wearing that shoes has a subconscious effect on how I'm going about that day.
Yeah, like you're ready to get up and run.
Yeah, and those are not running shoes. Those are like formal shoes.
Yeah, I know.
But it's like it does have like, so I don't know, like the kind of culture or the kind of things that we do subconsciously, they have effect on us. And It's like,
Yeah, I know. We're breaking this down in really interesting ways. I mean, we're talking about many little important things that make up for a more effective
yeah,
work from home
yeah.
strategy. And it's
There
like
was this interesting
putting your clothes on.
interesting thing that I read, which said that if the Britishers didn't have suits, their ability to colonize the world would have been much lesser, because the
Yeah,
suits somehow reflected that these guys can do business. So it gave
and
them
it's
much faster acceptance when they were like going to different places and trying to colonize. The whole attire gave them a faster access.
absolutely the attire. It increases your morale. It definitely gives you presence. It's just a simple thing. If you're dressed in a t-shirt and a pair of shorts versus somebody dressed in a suit, you know what I mean? Like there's just a presence difference. I think another. So we're talking about this in layers. A is like getting ready and before you start and like putting your clothes on, and, like if you're going to go and be prepared for the day. Not that it's the solution, but it could be a solution for people. The second thing is turning the camera on because we're human. We're animals. When we look at each other, there's micro gestures that we're taking into consideration subconsciously. And that's allowing us to maneuver around the conversation in a certain way. When we turn that camera off, that disappears. That's a whole layer of change that now doesn't exist. Now our secondary response is on the tonality of the voice and sort of those inflections and how that works. And so allowing for those layers to show perhaps will lead into more effectiveness. Now, what other things working from home before, yeah, that we talk about that could increase productivity? And I think that then next we could talk about like the pros and the cons of being
Yep.
in person and kind of then do a conclusion there.
So yeah, again, yeah, I think that's a good point. I mean, for some, the productivity has improved because of working from home. I've come across several developers who have shown much more responsibility and have produced more output when they're working from home compared to when they're working from office.
Hmm.
Especially like the developers who are introverts and who don't like to be disturbed during the day, and if their work environment within their homes support that, put them in a way, then their productivity
Hmm.
tends to increase. But then
Hmm.
I've also seen developers who are really good, who really are very productive in offices, but when they started working from home, their productivity dipped. They become irritated very quickly when they are questioned in team meetings. So yeah, I mean, this, it is a bit strange, depending on people.
Well, the psychology of people, in person and the psychology of people, the way they handle situations virtually is different, right? Because there's distance, there's a separation. So there's sort of like, there can be more, because I mean, less risk in a certain sense. When in person, it's like, okay, well, we're right here. What's up? You know what I mean? You can sort of address it. I mean, hopefully we're mature enough to just not, know what the boundaries, make us feel more tough through the internet. Ultimately, so okay, so let's shift over to the pros and cons of being in person. Like,
I think
what are
one
some
of the things
great
we
things that
definitely
you've
need to
seen?
discuss is, should we allow government employees to work from home? And I think that
Okay,
that's a very fundamental question.
well, government
Private
employees
enterprises
range.
have a different set of rules, and those are determined privately by the founders of the organization or board of directors. But when it comes to government, this is these government organizations pay the salaries of the employees from the taxes that they are collecting or from the wealth of the natural resources. So the question then becomes like, do we want to live in, or do we want to allow governments to encourage work at home policy, or do we want each and every government employee to work from office?
I mean, they say that the government isn't a business, but in this sense, it is a business because they are producing results. And if those results are not effective, then what is it? What are we spending our dollars on? So it's like, it is ultimately a business, all these different departments. There's several different types of work from a government perspective. There's, policing, there's investigation, there's social security, there's, multiple different divisions, and it varies. What's a particular area in government that you believe should not work from home?
I have a different take on this. I believe each and every employee of the government should work from the office, from the government offices.
No matter what
No matter what,
department.
no matter what the role, whether the role can be carried out from home or not, they should work from office.
Why?
And the predominant reason for that is, as a taxpayer, I want the work to be done no matter what by the government. And I don't want extra dependencies like, the situation at the home did not cooperate the employee to get the work done and all that. That should be eliminated. Those uncertain factors should be totally removed from the government job.
So, and this is the thing, who is, the government, these particular departments, they are funded by the government, right? They're part of, who's holding them accountable, and, who's sharing that to the public. We would obviously need transparency to understand, what's effective, what's not. But what you think ultimately, I mean, just at a very base level, what you're conveying and what I'm interpreting right now is that working in person is more effective, period. And now that you're working for the government and and you're getting paid by the community and the taxpayers, you better show up and do that fucking job. Like, I'm sorry for using language, but in a sense, this is kind of like what.
So you're choosing a career where you have decided to work for a government, and there's this taxpayer, the government is run by the taxpayers' money, then you have to show up to work every day and get things done. And if there's any politician or any head of an organization that wants to allow work at home for their employees, I think they should have a very solid reason for that. I mean, if somebody is physically challenged, I can understand that there's some leniency being provided for them. But for able men and women, they should show up at work and they should get the work done in the office.
Yeah, but then, okay, so let me play the other side of this. And I understand accountability here, right? Because it's ultimately about accountability. What we're saying in the conversation before government employees is, if the person does the job and they do it well, let them do it from the moon if they want to, right? They can do it from wherever, just do the job. So
It's a taking time bomb, right? If somebody is working on,
but is it about them showing up? Is it about them showing up, or is it about them doing the job? And if it's about them doing the job, should we have transparency to see what has been done, right? The famous question from Elon Musk, right? What did you do last week? So like some sort of a reporting aspect that would show and allow us to engage and see, if things are being accomplished. And do we care really if it's being done from home or not? Is it more accountability, or is it just, I mean, what is that? I'm just trying to understand the logic.
So there's a lot of aspects. I find it hard to find any government department that does not have access to confidential data. And this confidential data is being taken at home, and somebody's working from home where the spouse and the children and potentially his relatives who visit his home have access to, right? So whether somebody's working in tax department or intelligence or police department, any department, you take any department in the government, they have access to confidential data. So I don't want citizens' data to be compromised. And I don't think any citizen would like their government to compromise their data in any country in the world. So that's the number one aspect. The second aspect is, the accountability, because the government jobs are generally considered as, there's a higher purpose for a government job compared to a private job. The private job will have purpose defined by that organization's vision, that company's vision. And that might just be purely for the sake of earning some profits. Whereas a government, when it operates, and if it operates effectively, is meant to benefit the citizens. That is the sole purpose of the government, to benefit the citizens. When that is the purpose, I would rather want people to be absolutely held accountable for every possible situation that happens during their workday. In a government office, you are providing a very controlled environment for these employees to work and be more and more productive. Whereas at home, while there might be some leniency in terms of, they not traveling and all that, but it does not provide a controlled environment. There's children, there's spouse, there could be friends visiting, relatives visiting. There are too many distractions for this person to be held accountable.
I see what you're saying, and this makes sense. And I'm going to agree with you here. I like this. I like the points that you brought up. I think it does legitimize the idea that you should, not only the confidential information, but the job that needs to be done. It needs to be fulfilled, and I can see how this makes a lot of sense. Okay, so any other ideas regarding government employees specifically, and then we can maybe jump on to another
Yeah, and
topic.
other thing with government employees, opposing whole thing coming to office, I don't get it because when they were hired, they were specifically told about government and they're going to work from offices. So that's another big problem. I might sound this might come across as a bit of a rude thing, but if the country's government is engaged in a war, then government offices are a legitimate target. So by working at home, you're essentially using humans as human shields. So
Mm.
that's another, problem, and especially when certain countries are engaged in wars, and if they're allowing their employees to work from home, then they are legitimizing that homes can be attacked because in any conventional war, any government office is a legitimate target. So
Okay, that makes
another
sense.
aspect, like how do you deal with those kind of situations where and there are a lot of countries in the world today are engaged in some kind of warfare, and if somebody is working in a government, then they are by their job definition they're choosing to be part of that government, and you are a legitimate target in a war. So why would you want to work from home and legitimize attacking homes?
So, okay, this is a good point. I'm gonna bring this into a new topic in a way. We're talking about how we have, this the technology has brought in accessibility, and voice to everybody. It's equalized the playing field in a certain extent. Nowadays we have, broad teams from all over the world,
So, and I
working
know
on
I
these.
know you're ducking some topics, but I want to know your opinion. What do you think? Like what Elon Musk is doing is pushing the federal employees to write a status every week. Do you think that's the right move?
I love the idea, and people are always like, "Oh, Elon Musk is going too far." I think that there's a lot of things that were going too far before that nobody cared about, and now suddenly we're questioning where the funneling of money and money is being spent, and everybody's worried about that. Why? Why? We're as a country looking at all the government spending, looking in and out, and sharing it, and getting transparency and understanding where the money is going, and making decisions to cut funding so that we don't continue to dive into more debt that'll ultimately, you know, make a more difficult and complex life for our children and their children. We want to get out of debt, not create more. And it seems like a lot of these government entities were, using money to funneling money for all these very
I
strange,
can understand
um,
about US aid and organizations that are affiliated with CIA who are funneling funds to topple democracies and things like that. But what about, just, federal employees working in different departments, especially at the low level in those organizations? If there's no work allocated to them, what is this guy going to show in his status report? The problem is maybe not him. The problem could be someone at the top not allocating work for him.
Possibly. And for that reason, if there's no quantifiable results, then we cut it, right? Then we don't, if people are just there for decoration to say that, there's a department that does X, Y, and Z, but we don't even understand if it's effective or not.
But how do you determine that the problem is with the guy that was hired at a junior level or the guy at a senior level who is not coming up with new policies, new innovation within government departments and not assigning any
Exactly.
additional work?
It's both. It could be both. It can absolutely be both. I mean, at the end of the day, like, and I think we mentioned it before. It's like, people say the government isn't a business, but it is because it's using the money to accomplish X, Y, and Z tasks, and
Yep.
it's doing these things, And so, where are the results of it? Where are the quarterly statements, right? Like, this should be something that we should all be evaluating and understanding. And whether it's in the United States or any other country in the world, there's so much corruption within government where, infrastructure is to be built, but a lot of that money gets funneled to a politician's relationship with the company that builds the roads or that builds the building. And, everybody makes money. The project doesn't get completed and has to receive more funds. And that just happens over and over. And we see this in multiple countries. And like, why not implement this sort of strategy in most of the world? Yeah, I'm for it.
While I like what Elon Musk is doing, what I also feel is that it's all coming from him top down on the American politicians, but it's not the other way around. Why is that American politicians not speaking up and giving some tasks to Elon Musk? Like give him a task like, hey, American citizens should not spend more than 10 minutes to file taxes. It should all be automated through
Mm.
AI. You know, I think that is
Well,
something that a lot of American politicians right now are missing out, is giving a grand task to Elon Musk and say that, hey, if you think you are this smart billionaire that
right,
can solve
right.
things, here's a problem
Yeah,
that
do it.
citizens are facing. Why don't you solve it?
Yeah, this is a good point, right? Because everybody's just sort of in defense mode, like, oh, well, why? Why are you doing this? And why do we have to do this? And it's like this fight against why Elon Musk is implementing this and showcasing and diving into the productivity when it's true. Like, hey, now that you're in play, let's do this. Like challenge him in a way backwards, which ultimately will benefit, right? And I'm pretty sure he would rise to the challenge. I mean, this is the idea of that top down and even coming back forward, and that brainstorm will lead to more effectiveness ultimately. I think that's a great point. Being able to, and you don't hear much of it. I wonder if it is going on, and that's not getting shared because Elon Musk. It seems like as much as he does many great things. I mean, you go to X and it's like all him. It's like I look at my feed and everything's about him, and it's like life is about now. Like if you go online, it's everything about Elon Musk. It's crazy. It's
Yeah,
crazy that
that's
like
because he's the one who's creating the narrative, and everybody is like
yeah,
just countering the narrative that is put forward by him. But as
exactly.
long as some politician rises up, especially if it's a Democrat, it would be very interesting and good for democracy. When you have a healthy competition between both the ruling party and the party in the opposition. So
Yeah.
if the Democrat starts pushing with set of tasks that Elon Musk can accomplish, that unfortunately a stagnation is there in the United States, and there are a lot of areas where there's a lot of stagnation in the United States. I mean, it's the only country where wire transfer costs you know $20-$30. It's ridiculous.
I mean, you could send ACH, for free and do that, but
But
yeah.
why do you even have a wire
But
transfer in that case?
I think for immediate funds, in a sense, they could do cross international
Yeah,
transfers,
but
and I think
it doesn't make
international
sense.
transfers
Why
can
why
go.
are we paying so much amount of money to just do like a wire transfer
Do I agree that the banks are taking advantage of us? Absolutely. That's where
those
I
are the
hope
kind of guys
DeFi,
that we need to go
crypto and
after.
DeFi
Like,
come in.
what has happened is going after these federal employees who are hired and who are just doing a job. And they might not be doing the job that proficiently, and there might be problems in the leadership team who might not be giving them the jobs. But I don't think that is the bigger problem for American citizens. It has been created as a big problem that whole federal government is like all the federal employees are like become a liability on the country. I think that narrative is being created. The real problems are that even today you have insurance companies in the United States which are taking all the citizens for a ride. You have healthcare organizations that are
Well,
overcharging
okay,
substantially.
100%. I mean, we're talking about the real problems, right?
Yep.
The Federal Reserve, like the big pharma, big agriculture, all these humongous entities that really are the ones behind all the power. Absolutely, right? The government is just playing its role in
You're
there, but
going
they're getting
after
lobbied and
these
pushed and
like
hired.
federal employees who are like who for who probably are like patriots and who just want to serve the country and who join for the sake of serving the country. It's unfortunate that they are not being assigned good amount of work every week, and they were like made to become lazy by all this work at home policies. But now they're suddenly like, hey, you are responsible for all these problems. I think that narrative somewhere I feel is just misleading.
But we know that there's a ton of corruption in this sense, right? Because you have like the head of the FDA is then the CEO of Pfizer, and then there's this back and forth with very high-ranking politicians leading these large, whether it's pharmaceutical or banks, and it's this conflict of interest that's
Is that
insane.
is the
So,
corruption at the top level of these organizations or at the bottom level?
in my opinion, I think it's at the top
At the top
level.
level,
I
right?
mean, I think
So
that,
if Elon Musk is
yeah,
asking what have you accomplished, he should say that, okay, anybody at the bottom three levels, I don't care because you've just joined and you're just doing your job. But my question is to only the top leadership.
will he dare to fight the other elephants is the question.
Yeah, so it's
Does
like
he depend
you're
on the
celebrating
elephants?
few maybe 1,000 or 2,000 people at the bottom, and you're celebrating and beating your
Right,
chest that hey, I'm a billionaire, I saved all this thousands of dollars,
right.
but you're actually just
I took a couple of pawns, but you still have the bigger players in the background that are making the bigger moves that have far more impact. This is a very good point. Like, does he go toe to toe with the elephant? Right, right. Yeah. You don't call out the mid level. You don't call out the rooks. You don't call out the knights. You don't even mention the queen. Yeah. So you brought up a great point before, and I think it was regarding how Elon Musk is playing tough with, all the lower level government employees and cutting departments. And while cutting these departments is efficient because there is probably a top dog that overlooks the entire department, and just getting rid of the department is efficient. But does Elon Musk go against the elephants in the world, right? The big pharma, the big ag, the real players, the banks, the people who are really really lobbying and sending heavy amounts of money to influence, certain decisions, and these politicians, ask Elon Musk then in turn to step up to the plate and go fight against the elephants. If there's a bunch of elephants in the room, who's fighting against the big guys? Why are the lower level employees taking the hit? I mean, they are taking the hit because they do comprise a department which was established probably by a larger player. But what does that look like?
Yeah, the American politicians will ever step up to propose larger goals for Elon Musk because they don't want to lose their lobbies,
There's so much
right?
interest, so much corruption.
Yeah, there's so much of the big pharma companies and the insurance companies, the healthcare companies. They all are funding these politicians. So they
Yeah.
are not going to go to Elon Musk and say, "Hey, this is the problem that American citizens are facing. Let's solve this." They don't want that problem to be solved. They don't want the cost of medicines to come down in the United States. They don't want the healthcare cost to reduce. They don't want everybody to be covered under insurance. That's not how they want the system to run.
And it's sad because then it goes back to another point in another podcast that we were making, that it's like, what do pharmaceutical companies truly want? And they're the ones that are heavily influencing, the healthcare, industry. And what do they want? They want sick people so they can continue to, provide, solutions, temporary ones at least. And so it becomes this just a circle of business that continues to go around. And this happens in multiple different areas. And you have somebody like, Robert Kennedy that's jumping in and going against big pharma, and putting different restrictions and regulating certain ingredients within the United States that will help. But there needs to be a transformation. There needs to be people that go against these big entities, because the real control comes from the money, and the money comes from these bigger players in various industries that do have all the control and that do lobby in a way that you can't even you don't fight against. So who's going to be the hero to go against the elephants that can step on you, right? That can just do something, and it's scary in a sense. It takes bravery. It takes a lot of guts to go against these bigger players. So to ask him, I mean, if he truly is on the side of the people, and it seems so, at least to a certain extent, can he go against these bigger players and change, for more, healthcare to be more accessible, all these different things that we're talking about.
Yeah, I agree with you, but I don't see he would ever do that. He would most probably, fire some low-level federal employees and call himself a champion.
Well, there is efficiency being provided at the end of the day. I mean, if there isn't a department that's doing something and there's a lot of money being spent on it and it's not producing a quantifiable result that makes sense, then I mean, there is some cutting and some, removal of expenses to a certain extent, but like, there's bigger core problems. This is just like cutting off the edges. He's smoothing out edges, but there's larger problems that definitely do exist. That it's also a big ask to say, hey, go and solve these larger scale problems. These larger scale problems are the ones that like fundamentally hold in play this whole this sort of house of cards, right? And they're so ingrained, and there's such depth. It's hard. This establishment is so
Yeah.
embedded into the system. It is the system.
What do you think about Trump bullying Ukraine to sign the deal for rare earth minerals?
I read about that the other day. There's so much going on in the background that we're not aware of. There's so much business that goes on in the background. I don't have an opinion on that right now. What do you feel about it?
I find it very strange that on one side, American politicians shout over rooftops on how much weapons they want to supply to Israel. Whereas when it comes to Ukraine, they're basically asking Ukrainians to sell their future in order to protect themselves.
Well, let's look at this from okay. So I mean, look, that's the leverage point it seems. And so let's look at this from like a I mean, how powerful is Russia right now? And how much longer can the Ukraine survive? And would you minimize damage by allowing, coming to some sort of a deal with Russia, allowing them to keep the certain areas that they've already invaded, which it's going to be probably hard to go in there and change that, or just continue to let them go and move forward and continue the war and fund it? What's less damaging at this point?
Well, the question then it becomes like, how come about 50 years ago, US funded Afghanistan to keep fighting with the Russians? And Afghanistan was much more poorer and lesser prepared compared to Ukraine, but it did fight the Soviet Union and it did defeat them, and which eventually resulted in dissolution of the Soviet Union.
Do you believe that that in today's day and age, Russia is, from a weapons perspective, much more of a threat compared to the Soviet Union at that time? So if
No, it's not.
damage,
It's not. The question was not about that. The question was that the strategy of funding a smaller, weaker nation over the years to destroy a larger power actually worked in the past.
right?
So
But it's
so it will
the
work
answer is
now as
directly
well.
related.
The whole world fully is aware that Ukraine is just a pawn, and the pawn was used to do like in a bigger power play.
But the question I pose does root into this exactly. Like if Russia is more of a threat from a nuclear perspective, let's say they do get to a point where it's getting resources are limited, things are getting complex for Russia. Do they have more? Are they armed from a nuclear perspective much more than the Soviet Union was at that time? Is that much more of a threat? Can the damage be that much more? Are we willing to take
So,
that risk? The world has
yeah,
changed.
so
The threat is
I
larger.
now I get your question, and yeah, it makes sense because at that point for US, defeating Soviet Union was the most important thing. So they whatever the options over there on the plate, they funded that options. But now defeating Russia is not the priority number one because China is far more superior compared to Russia. So US sees in the list of threats, Russia maybe on number two or number three. So it's they just want to trade off Ukraine and just move on.
I mean, that's one thing. So that's the bigger question. It's like, okay, so is there a bigger threat that we're facing? If we really put Russia into the corner based on, the amount of resources they have and military power, to what extent will they,
So,
what limits that
do
from
you
taking
not think
nuclear?
that this will set a precedence that every American ally will now think that America can sell them off?
There's a risk to that, absolutely. In the larger aspect of things, it does show weakness nonetheless. Now, we're negotiating at this point because more death isn't worth it.
Because it just made so much easy for China to have conversation with all the American allies, saying that hey, you're going to be down.
Right. Like sooner or later, there's gonna be more pressure applied. Like this isn't the end. This is just the beginning of the continuation of the story, because this is the story and it does evolve. And I mean, do we as human beings that are somewhat intelligent, I'd say, you know what I mean? Like, do we continue to go down this path of, killing each other in wars? Does this just continue to go on as it has, in the past? Or do we, reach a level where we discover new things and we start focusing on something different, as opposed to, taking over territories and, crossing lines and doing these things?
Yeah, I think the common American citizen would have a different say, but American politicians who are funded by lobby groups and funded over and over and over again throughout their career, they tend to have a different opinion. At times, I find like US, while it is one of the freest country in the world, but at the same time, I feel like it's a country that is under more shackles than any other country in the world
If you're
because
the superpower of the world, you are under shackles.
your politician is not going to listen to you in the moment of crisis.
Well, if when you're at the top of the hill, you can only go down. It's just a matter of time with everything, with every empire we've seen over time. I mean, there's only, you do have shackles, you do have all these responsibilities, and you can't go any further up. I mean, you can try and maintain, but it's only a matter of time. You can,
Yeah.
and so that pressure exists.
I think what the analysts across the globe are super surprised is how quickly Trump administration dumped Ukraine and the public humiliation that followed post that having bilateral direct conversations with Russia and not giving a seat at the table for both Ukraine and Europe.
But I mean, first of all, like, the U.S. has put all the money and all the resources into defending Ukraine. Second of all, like half of the money that was sent to Ukraine is unaccounted for. Somehow it's been lost. And third of all, the United States, can only defend Ukraine. It's not even a NATO ally, right? And so, yeah, there seems to be interests in the background that are sitting that, we're all not a part of. But Trump has always been talking about negotiating with Putin, and this is another elephant to elephant. Like, you know, Trump and Putin will arrive at some sort of a negotiation. Zelensky's a pawn. He's just laundering money. I can't even take Zelensky seriously. Did you see the video of him? Like this music video that he's dancing with high heels? Like, who is this guy, man? Why? I mean, I just don't understand.
There are similar videos of Trump as well. He has done a lot of reality shows.
But dancing in high heels in a music video, and it's not like that either.
They say that there is a tape of Trump, but we're not gonna speculate here. But there were a lot of news coverage about that, so I'm not making it up. It was all over American media.
I don't love Trump. I don't really love anybody. There's nobody that is like, I think Elon Musk is an incredible entrepreneur. Do I believe that everything he's done has been perfect? Do I believe that he hasn't, done certain things in business from a business perspective that have been wildly dumb? Is he incredible at times? Yes. It's like, there's a lot of, nobody on a pedestal. But at this point, I think Trump is one of the greatest negotiators in the world, and you have arguably one of the best entrepreneurs in the world currently, playing a game and trying to
the question that the world is asking is it good for American democracy for a non-elected person with a lot of money to just buy power?
Well, is
that good for the democracy?
On the other side of it, we have Soros, right, funding all these different events. So in the background, at least,
Elon Musk is becoming what Soros was hyped up to be.
Is it? Are we? I mean, and look, I'm not saying Elon Musk is perfect either. I mean, for all we know, like this is only serving more interest to his business, and right, he's having more reach now, and perhaps now he has moats around, his approaches to the world in business, and a step forward than anybody in certain industries to do what he wants to do, and a step into accessibility to implement technologies that possibly exist that are competition to his, and where he'll be able to maybe monopolize certain industries. So is he in a favorable position? Yes. Was this favorable for him? Yes. It seems like even before that he was getting like in these EV summits and reunions, Biden would leave him out, right? It would bring in GM and Toyota and leave him out completely. And so it's like you have this anger, and now he's all embedded into politics, and now he's going to be the favorable choice. And as a business person, you're trying to create as many streams forward as you can to bring in more revenue and grow your company. And I mean, if it takes, you getting into politics and becoming more involved, and it seems like that's what it took, and that's what he did, and he's doing it. But in a sense, you feel like society is having a say in what these things are, right? And he's hyping people up, like, hey, look, like, I'm going to expose everything. So everybody's on his side thinking, hey, this is what we need.
I think that it has sent out a message to the rest of the entrepreneurs in the world that you can buy the biggest superpower in the world by spending a fraction of your wealth.
I don't think that he just did that, though. See, there's a combination of things that he did effectively that allowed him to get to this position.
Of course, we took a calculated risk, but I'm sure going forward there will be more forthcoming entrepreneurs who are going to say that, hey, if Elon Musk can do it, why not? I give a shot.
Absolutely, but if you think about it, from a business perspective, he'll have his interest by doing that, and you could have interest to do that, but you need the say of the people. You need the people to push you forward. Without the people, Elon Musk is nothing. He has effectively created a presence.
I think Jeff Bezos would be right now strategizing how he can influence the next election.
Yeah, most likely. I mean, with that kind of money, I mean, can you ever trust anybody with 500 million, $1 billion or more? Like, absolutely not, man. There's so much interest at that point that you can't, like, they're living a whole different perspective, a whole different life. You don't even understand what world they're in. Their power is at such a different level. And so, yeah, I think anybody with in the hundreds of millions of dollars, anybody with that kind of money has incredible influence and can push to do certain things that will benefit them. And what is their agenda?
Yep. I agree. I think what this whole thing has taught the world is that it doesn't cost more than, probably $2 to $3 billion to buy out the largest superpower in the world. I think that understanding now has circulated across the globe, and with this $5 million visa, I think a lot of even Russian billionaires must be thinking, hey, what the hell? We could just move to US and start influencing their politicians.
Well, I mean, look, the reality is this, and this is Jeff Bezos is a great example. Jeff Bezos doesn't have the people behind him, generally
Well,
speaking.
he has Washington Post, and I
He,
think
he,
when he acquired Washington Post, that was his intention, but maybe he was not as aggressive and as open as Elon Musk has been.
and so so it doesn't just, my point is, it doesn't just take money. It takes the influence of the people. And if the people are behind you, that's why Elon Musk is where he is, because the people follow him. And so how does he get the people? He speaks to certain things that allow for you to engage and say, hey, this is real, right? Hey, we're going to cut departments. We're going to cut spending. We're going to do this. He could have his influence in the background that's happening. He's obviously having incredible influence towards his companies and getting government contracts now because he has so much influence. But what did he have to do? He had to capture the people. It's like in Rome. It's like the gladiators, right? The gladiator would capture the people, or the people would vote if to kill or not to kill the
People can
particular
always turn
gladiator.
against. I mean, narrative can be created to turn the people.
Right.
It's a matter of time that people turn.
Well, he captured the people, and that's why he's there, and that's why Jeff Bezos isn't there. And so it's not. My point ultimately is it's money.
Agreed.
It's
But
not just
now
money.
what he has done is created a roadmap for a lot of other entrepreneurs.
Well, it's gonna if you have the push of the people, you're gonna have influence no matter what, and even if you don't have that much money. The people is more valuable than the money. It's just like the politicians. Politicians don't have mega millions initially. They do after, but
Yeah, I'm sure, Bill Gates and others who aspired similar kind of power are crying in the corner with what Elon Musk is doing. But he
it's,
definitely has set a new roadmap for a lot of entrepreneurs. Um, I think democracy for the longest time has fascinated people, but behind the curtains, it was always the rich who controlled it.
yeah, well, it takes the combination of the people and the money. And if you think about it, like Bill Gates is a great example. People, generally speaking, aren't fans of Bill Gates. Do you see that?
Yeah, because he didn't create that public perception. I mean, if you look at between Bill Gates and Steve Jobs, while both of them created this amazing companies that changed the whole technology landscape, but Steve Jobs was able to create this public perception that he is the innovator, he is the torchbearer of innovation, whereas Bill Gates was always seen as the guy who's cunning and grabbed the market share by killing other software companies. So I think there was certain narrative building, whereas both of them were equally competitive, equally innovative, equally path breaking in building their companies.
But I think that the lack of people following Bill Gates and him having the type of influence that an Elon Musk or a Steve Jobs had is the things he dedicates himself to, right? Seems on the surface, oh, we're gonna treat children in Africa, we're gonna give them vaccines, and we're gonna do all this, and he's always up to something that is very controversial in a sense.
Yeah, and then the guy also traveled to the Epstein Islands.
Right, exactly. There's a lot of, I mean, his wife left him for what reason? What do we really know about that? That was shortly after these, look, I'm not pointing any fingers. I don't know.
Yeah, we don't know, but he definitely was friends with that guy, and he has
Yeah,
admitted that.
no, no. A lot of controversy.
Yeah,
So, so do we go back to remote working or do we go back to the office?
I'm not working at Microsoft anymore, so I can definitely talk about Bill Gates.
Yeah.
But coming back to Elon Musk, I think definitely there is a significant level of disservice that he's doing for democratic countries. There will be a lot of rich entrepreneurs in various countries which have vibrant democracies where they will now start exerting more power.
Hmm.
Looking at the template that Elon Musk has set.
Yeah. I mean, I hear where you're going with it, but I ultimately can say that this has always been going on. The money has always been there. What he's done is he's combined money and people as for influence, and you need both ultimately because there is somewhat of a democracy that does exist where the people do have say. And if the people, and we were talking about that before, what does social media do? Social media gives a voice, and that voice echoes through places that, every corner of the world. And that voice resonates and then creates opinion and then people share their opinion. Just how it gave access to intelligence and different perspective and just how
You think
Alexandria.
China has played a wonderful game of chess from the very beginning by not encouraging American social media in their country? Because somebody like Elon Musk, who does not have a controlling social media within China, would have a much lesser sway in creating a public opinion in China. And Chinese knew this, or Chinese calculated this beforehand when they kind of toned down the whole American social media within their country.
Yeah, they just removed it completely. But the reality is then they had their own agenda and their own way. So did they play chess with their agenda? Yes. Is it right? I don't know.
But
Do you need
were they smart enough to calculate 10 moves beforehand?
But what is I mean, are we, I mean, is different opinion and speech access to all this, is that good or bad?
The other way to look at it is that they won't let a foreign billionaire influence their public,
I
whereas
mean,
Europe
the foreign,
now is like,
they could have never predicted that the foreign billionaire was going to have the power they did. I mean, they've been doing this since before 2010, right? They've been doing this for a
yeah,
long
but
time. Facebook
yeah,
and
they
all this.
just anticipated that this is how we want to build our country, and this is how we want to build their country. This is how they want to turn their country into a superpower by anticipating what kind of threats that can happen.
Perhaps. And is it a good or a bad thing? I don't know.
So, do you reckon that was a better risk management strategy?
Do I see that they were anticipating that strategically from back when they did that? I don't know. And I don't know if having, I don't,
Because social media, while it came into existence as this whole thing about free speech and people expressing themselves, but ultimately now it has become like the platforms where governments can define their agenda, and the social media founders are now themselves are aligning with different governments.
that's true. There's a two-sided sword to this conversation because as much as it does give free speech is as much as it can sway people into thinking certain ways.
Yeah.
So,
So do you reckon like countries like India and other countries should start building their own social media platforms and give some strict competition to these ones that are right now
but
are competing?
what is the ultimate goal of it? Was it to create an agenda of a belief system and push that on everybody, or is it to allow people to go get data from whenever they want and kind of build their own conclusions and understanding that it's swayed? Is there some sort of like a way to, it's hard because then the conversation is, do you suppress free speech? Is it free speech if it's being, swayed? And so there's everything is questionable at this.
Yeah, yeah, agreed. And that's what is happening. Like, people are like questioning, like, hey, I can speak whatever I want on the social media, but if the algorithms don't show my speech to others, then it's effectively like me making noise in a closed room.
Right. That's true.
And that's what is happening very effectively on social media, where selectively they are turning on the knobs where the loudspeaker needs to be on and where it needs to be kept silent. And I think that's definitely impacting. Coming back to Elon Musk itself, I also feel that whenever there is a personality cult, eventually ends into a disaster.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't like, we've set him up as this hero and the thing is, it's easy to fall for this and it's something you fall for. But if you look at it based on accomplishments, right? You have NASA, you have all these companies sending rockets into space. This guy, Boeing, all these huge companies doing all this stuff with all this funding. And this guy goes and does it better than everybody. more effective and is landing the rocket back and, catching it in midair and doing all this stuff. This guy's a hero. I mean, he is without a doubt. But when you give that hero now too much power, where does that go? So, right. I could see it how like, that ego can go uncontrollably crazy in whatever way it wants, right? Because now he is the ultimate, right? He is the top, he's the pinnacle. So whatever he thinks or does is above everything, and so he's going to push for it. And he has the money and the influence to do it, and it probably isn't always beneficial to, the country, right? Or the world, or who knows? What is, is there many sides to this?
Yeah. Are you still there or?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm here.
I think we should do a full podcast on Elon Musk itself, and we need to, understand his thought process about a lot of things while he has built all this, these companies. But there's certain thought process that he's trying to impose on the rest of the world. And while I might appreciate him from a technology standpoint, what he has accomplished, but I differ on a lot of things that he is trying to impose on the world. So we should definitely have a podcast on
Billionaires'
on him,
influence in the world.
his influence.
Yeah, I agree. Perfect. Let's do it.
Is there anything else that I want to discuss about this, or should we close this topic? I mean, while we started from work at home and work from office, we went across many other topics.
Well, this is a direct correlation into that because this affects this type of, we were talking about government jobs specifically, and so cutting of those government jobs and the influence of one person to do all these things and who they should maybe really be going after and the other elephants in the room and who's getting addressed and who are the real power players and what are the real problems. And if we get to the core of the problems, where are they? And should we be focusing on that? And should we be demanding then the elephant go fight against the other elephants rather than, cut a little bit off the corner and everybody feel happy? Should we really be attacking the pillars of this? Because the pillars are the ones holding it up. And who's holding it up? And so should we restructure that? And what would that look like? And how difficult is it?
Yeah, as usual, Antonio, this has been a wonderful, wonderful conversation. I thoroughly enjoyed this. We should do more of these podcasts. I think we were doing quite frequently, but now we haven't done. But I think we need to step up the pace.
Absolutely. Let's do it. Thank you for the chat. I love this.